Hello, this is Will. I'm a real werewolf. Please like and subscribe to this channel if you would, or video or whatever. I've been asked to stop swearing by Louis, so as a favour, I'm going to stop swearing in this bit. Okay, this is again another real werewolf interview. This one's bit personal, okay? So I'm sharing a bit of personal information here, so have a bit of respect, my wife has passed, okay? So I'm going to tell you about how I met her and stuff, but please remember in your mind that she's passed. Her posit is out there wandering somewhere free at the moment, trying to find a new host, but that's another story. Her wolf soul. Sorry, if you don't know what wolf soul is, we combined with wolf souls from way back, and the soul chooses a person to become a werewolf. Asa, my wife, was one of the original werewolf tribe, and she'd been around for hundreds of years with her posit. And I'm not going to go into the details of how she died, but she died a very rare thing for a werewolf. But her posit then is released, and it will wander around until it finds another one. The werewolf soul will try and find another person. But anyway, it's just really personal. So apparently these videos are going out on a YouTube channel, so you can subscribe to that if you want. Apparently that helps get the word out there. If you could do that, that'd be great. There's a website as well, www.werewolf.host. There's more information on there, and you can actually speak to me on there apparently. I've got an administrator's account or something. But anyway, this is actually everything else has kind of been done with fun. This one's a bit personal. So thanks for listening. It's been so good to actually get this information out to the world. I'm at really high risk doing this, as you can imagine, but it's been really good to actually get this information out here. So anyway, this is how I met my wife. I didn't really know I had a wife until I met her, but then I found out. So anyway, let me go into the story. It was one night I was out having fun in St Andrews in Scotland. I was having fatal furry fun in St Andrews in Fife. It's in Scotland, if you don't know where it is. You must have heard of St Posh Wankers Andrews, the golf capital of the world. It has great architecture, history, sightseeing, thingamies, and architecture. It also has a university where you go if you're posh and don't get into Oxbridge. St Andrews makes it a whole lot easier to get into medieval last holes than Camford. You don't need the grades, you just let mummy and daddy buy you a place on a course of your choice. You know, you can do a BA of the history of drama and leg wobbling, or maybe the BA in the role of French dyslexic poets in the space race, or something even more pointless like fucking economics or something. The town city placey also has mad golf tourists invade it from all the richest countries of the world. It also had the rich fuckers arrive from the developing countries that they run and steal from also. Maybe the title of a developing country is wrong. It should probably be the poor countries from which they steal and make those countries poorer. These feckless golfing fuckwits are all going there to play the stupidest game that exists. They get dressed in the most expensive and stupidest clothing that you can wear to make you look expensively stupid. I'm convinced that golfing fashion styles are put together by those that have hurt or have been hurt by the game in some vicious way. According to the Financial Times, St Andrews has the highest tourist spend per day per visitor in the UK. I like the rich and I like tourists. Tourists are really great fun. They have a tendency to think they are safe due to them being in St Andrews, which is a little like Harry Potter land. They can't see there being anything terrible here like crime or herpes or even the odd werewolf. The golfers I have hinted at are all fucking knobs. The golfers deserve to just, die just because they like that fucking game, honestly. It's just like marbles with a considerable walk. What was it that Winston Churchill said about golf? Hitler's a cunt? No, not that. The game of golf spoils a good walk. I describe it as a bag of shit game for big bags of expensively dressed shit to go out and play. I fucking hate golf. It's a sport that I'm not naturally good at. that means I hate it with a passion that shite game deserves. If I'm not as good as a 72-year-old semi-senile American dressed like his fucking flag is, then it's not worth my time. I also hate those that enjoy it, those rich scumbags who do the golfing stuff. Just the enjoyment of something so shite would give me another reason if I needed reasons to kill them. The golfers also unwittingly wander on the open fairways, and with so many courses, 18-ish I think in St Andrews, there's always quite a time to play on a peaceful green or three. That is ace for me when wanting to wolf around. It provides me with many a course choice for many a course meal on many a golf course. The city also has a large body of incredibly affluent international students during term time. Wealthy students who have rarely had to suffer or show fear. They have money and influence, and so when the money and power does not protect them, they lose all hope very quickly. The money and the influence have also given them the overconfidence of our betters, overconfidence that can lead them into all sorts of issues. I love it there. It's like a supermarket of wealthy people, like a world buffet that has many different flavours of human, quite literally. What I also like about the multitude of foreign visitors is that it takes a while for anyone to work out that they have disappeared when they are suddenly gone. They may have decided to go, I suppose, and explore somewhere else in Scotland, like my belly. I'd just fed on West Sands Beach. A sweet young thing that I met in a bar on North Street. She'd been in her second year of... whatever she'd been studying, it was not very interesting, and she was not very bright. She was not a significant loss to literature, science, or medicine, or whatever. She did taste French. No, I'm not saying she was like garlicky or something like that. It's just that after tasting many cultures and countries' offerings, you recognise these things. I'd finished eating and was walking back along the beach towards the town. My posit walked by me, and he was enjoying the wind blowing in from the sea. And in our heads, we had that after feed joy, and we're discussing the favourite moments of the kill, the most enjoyable post-prandial chat. The telepathic conversation between us dwindled to silence as the wind had changed in the direction, and from out of nowhere I was hit with the gentle tap of a sledgehammer blow of a smell in the nasal region. Something amazing smashed my senses. There was a certain smell, an intoxicating aroma. It was like taking a line or two of very good coke, Peruvian flake, 98%. The scent burst into my brain, releasing massive doses of endorphins that rushed around my body. It was incredible. I needed to know what that smell was, and I needed to know where it came from so that I could get to know it. My posit raised his snout head and sniffed the air, turning his face this way and that. A great toothy smile spread across his face. His great grey tongue lolled from his mouth as he sent powerful emotions and thoughts to my forebrain. "What is it?" I asked. "It's not an it. It's a her," he sniggered. "A her?" I repeated, now intrigued. "She's been near, and she has been near recently. I think she's trying to find us." And this was all the posit would say. He refused more questions. That was the first time I smelled it, and I spent a lot of time searching for its owner over the next few weeks. I would return to St Andrews a lot for food, which was always easy to find in this university town with such a high student suicide rate, and with the hope that I would find that amazing aroma once again. The best time to find any odour was on one of the very few still winter nights in St Andrews. If the stars were out, and especially if it was cold and frosty, the flavour of her would be on the air. It would stifle the other smells that humanity created through its waste and stench. I desperately needed to find its source, as it was so tantalising yet always just untraceable. It was as if the owner knew how to mask herself from me. Maybe she did. It was all too exciting. Night after night I would wander the streets to find her. Night after night I would get a fleeting sense of her presence but never find her. It was a very long time before I smelt the bitch as strong as that first night. It was the following damp January when walking through the main town. I'd been on the hunt but had got bored, so just fed and left. No torture, no fun, just food. To be honest, I'd started to get fed up of sensing the perfume but not finding my target. Then I got a really deep and satisfying whiff of her. I was walking back to the car at night through the main street past one of the fancy new glass-fronted bars, juggling my keys from hand to hand as I enjoyed the scrutiny of those that passed by. It had been that miserable pre-snow rain that the streets were not so busy as usual. I looked up from juggling my keys and I noticed a beautiful scene in the massive picture window at the front of a bar. 4 young, unusually pretty women sat having drinks, what looked like a lot of fun. Overriding everything was the heady scent that ignited something in the wolfy part of me. They were all sat at a high table, their stools surrounding it. It was lit like a scene set on a stage to promote the bar. Nothing could entice people more from the outside to the inside on a wet winter's night. The women were all so beautiful and talking and laughing at the news of the day. I stopped and paused in the act of throwing my keys, squeezing my grip around them as I stared at the scene, the leather on my gloves creaking as it tightened on my skin. My posit had stopped dead also, and in my head I heard him whistle. "Fuck me," he said. "It's her." He looked at me from his place alongside. "It's her, Will. She's found us." "She who?" I said, in replying, but ignoring him and seeing this table of 10s and sensing the smell of something more. Sensing them, I made my way towards the door of the bar to see if I could get involved in their evening. It was only on waiting somewhat patiently for 2 men to leave the doorway that I noticed something strange in the stage production of the scene in the window. I stopped, my mouth agape, and turned towards the women. It was then that I noticed it. It lay there below the table. It was something that should not have been, something that I had only ever encountered one of in my life before. I turned towards my posit and dumbly pointed at the creature sat at the feet of the women. "Is that a fucking posit? Is that a fucking posit?" I asked him. He nodded his head in response. "Yes, Will," he smiled, "that's most definitely a posit." His ears had pricked up and he shook himself to clear some of the moisture from his fur. I could sense his excitement, and that excitement was being really transferred to me. It was definitely not a big dog. It was definitely a posit. There sat a gigantic grey-white wolf at the base of the table, snoozing. I could not move. I was fascinated. As I stared, the lion posit started to twitch its nose, then it swiftly lifted its head and looked through me. No, it wasn't me it noticed, it was my posit. Their eyes met and they just stared at one another. The world seemed to stop for a moment as they communicated. I could not listen to their conversation, but I knew that they were having one. As I continued to watch them, my mouth now hanging open, one of the women slowly withdrew themselves from the conversation and slowly reached a hand down towards the resting posit. It was as if she was going to try and tickle it behind the ears or settle its restfulness. As she strove to touch it, she stopped and froze, then slowly turned to look out of the window for something, and I knew she was looking for me. Her gaze crashed into mine, and there was a moment that lasted a million years. I felt her in my head. I felt myself in hers. Sheer recognition of another one of me. Her hair was black as night, and neatly styled on top of her head, and her eyes were such a piercing green. Those eyes were no normal eyes of a human monkey. Those eyes were that of a predator, a killer. She had me transfixed, unmoving for the first time in my life. I was literally unable to leave that spot or look away. I now knew how my prey felt, locked rigidly in position, terrified and yet excited. Her features were perfect and cold, with high cheekbones and a sculpted nose giving a general regal air to her looks and attitude. She flowed from her seat and insinuated her way to the window. There she stood facing me. She wore a short blue dress on her pale skin. The dress was a perfect classic satin couture style in a livid blue. Her hands went to her hips and she stared at me. Her posit sat up and shook its head and yawned. It then made its way to its feet with another full-body shake, padding to her side and sitting by her to create a magical scene from a film. It was a scene that my life had always needed to see, but up until now at this point, I'd not really known that I needed it. I could focus on nothing else, only on her. And the wolf before me? She smirked at me, then looked down and inspected her red nails, slowly lifting her head and directing her smile at me like a weapon. It rocked me with its power. It was a lot more than an ordinary smile. It was a sharp-toothed expression of amusement and beauty. I was in utter awe of her. I did not know what to do. Everything else in life I had ever wanted, I just took without thought. Now, I wanted her, but I wanted her to want me, to want her, which is just weird. The moment suddenly broke as she looked away. I felt somewhat hurt that she'd let go of that instance that should have gone on forever, but instead of the usual anger, I felt something else. A need for her to give me that attention again. She turned to her friends, who seemed to be in slow motion now. She grabbed a jacket and put on a fur hat. She was ignoring me. I could not stop looking at her. I was willing her to see me again. My opposite smirked, and a thought came from him into my head. You got it bad, boy. Thanks, Fen. She had all my attention, and she fucking knew it, so she took her time, teasing me with her apparent indifference, and with each subtle thing she did. She smiled again as she stood and opened her bag, removing a compact with which she checked her perfect makeup. She put on her fur coat and left, saying her goodbyes to her friends, giving each a small hug and a kiss. The girls looked confused and questioned her leaving, so she nodded towards me, where I was transfixed. 3 faces turned my way and beamed. Each girl gave the others a knowing look and a giggle. Then she left them. I stood motionless and waited, feeling a little stupid and embarrassed in front of the women still seated in the bar. It was a rare thing for me to feel this way, so inside I became a little annoyed. I also felt a sense of loss that she'd gone from my sight. All new feelings for me. Then the front door opened and she stood in front of me for a moment. She wore a cream white full-length fur and a matching hat and was a Russian princess. She wished the doorman good night before walking towards me, with a posit trailing her at first, and then the posit ran out before her, its tongue lolling, and it ran towards me. My posit in response charged forward and met hers as though it was the best friend that he'd not seen for years. She continued walking towards me, her eyes fixed on mine, a predatory grin on her lips, a little longer in her canine teeth. Her walk was enough to set alarm bells in my head. I had never seen anything that I wanted more. The 2 posits played excitedly as tiny puppies would. They were busy chasing, running, and made their greetings in very doggy ways that really aren't appropriate to humans. She walked past them towards me, and as she approached, my senses were in overdrive. They were overloaded. The beauty of her graceful movement, athletic and without a waste of any energy. I could observe that she was a powerful creature in complete control of her physical being. For you humans with your poor sight, hearing and smell, I can never do this description of her justice in prose. You are just too poorly equipped. The smell was like the blossoming of colours. Blues and whites surrounded her and sparkled. She stirred parts of me into a frenzy, not a hurtful frenzy, but just a need. I was feeling things I'd never known, a want and yet not a requirement to take. Hunger, yet not a want to feed. She stopped smiling a couple of feet in front of me. The effect was something like a half brick to the side of the head, that brick removing all thoughts of anything but her. She spoke. I think we should talk, Will, she said in a heavenly and heavily accented Russian accent. I was speechless. How did she even know my fucking name? I have been keeping a somewhat impatient eye on you. You do a lot of killing, huh? She asked, amusement playing on her lips. Her accent was pure Russian. It was just suited the moment. She seemed very intelligent and gave off a sense of smartness well beyond mine. She had me worked out already. I was tongue-tied. I had no idea how to reply. I wanted to tell her off, to answer her cleverly and candidly. That's what I would usually do, but I just couldn't. No, it's not that I don't approve of the killing. It's just the fact that you do so much of it and it's in my territory. How am I supposed to ever keep up, Will? She laughed. She was playing with me, and I did not know how to respond to it in the slightest. I would not usually allow this. I would have taught her not to be wise with me. I would have been strong and alpha, but I could not in this case. She took hold of my hand and gave me a wicked smile and dragged me into the night. The posits followed, walking flank to flank, and I could hear them in my head communicating with each other, not in a language I knew, but it was as if they had a lot of catching up to do. Are you going to tell me who the fuck you are? I asked. She turned and smiled. The light gleamed off her teeth. The light gleamed out of her eyes. I'm your wife, she said. Okay, I don't remember having a wife, I answered. She giggled in response and pointed at the posits. They were in rapture on one another, running alongside each other, body to body, tongues lolling and happy. Well, I am, and you have been an incredibly difficult bastard and a big pain in the ass to find, Will. So now you need to catch up with the loving of me. She held out her hand, and I took it again. Something was just right. I could hear the posit in my head as he span and played with the other. As we walked to wherever we were going, I was a little perplexed and confused, but the level of interest in what would happen next was much more intriguing, so I thought I would keep my mouth shut and just see what would happen. As we walked, we talked. Well, I walked and she walked and talked. Her voice was captivating. It took me somewhere wild and free. She smelled like, well, I cannot explain what it was like. Well, I can. It was like just really nice. And it took me some time to focus in on what she was actually saying. Life was going to get interesting the next wee while, as they say in Scotland. She talked for most of the walk, but nothing had gotten through to the understanding part of me. I'd just been lost in my thoughts as I travelled. She then paused and stopped and just looked at me. Shall we hunt? You better know my name is Asa. I ran the name a few times in my head. Asa? Okay. And then I answered, why not? We were walking behind a sweet young couple who were giving off the smells I relate to sexual excitement. We followed them as I could see the interest that Asa was giving them. She wanted to hunt, chase, and maybe kill. Her entire focus was on her prey, and I could sense the predator mind start to function. These poor little sheep would stray and probably lose their way this night, poor little lambs. We walked in silence, holding hands. All the focus was borne on our prey. Behind us, the two posits walked, still their minds buzzing with communication, but their excitement grew as they sensed our excitement and interest in the hunt. We were still silent walking and listening to our prey, chatting as they bimbled along, unaware they did not sense the danger that the night brought. They were lost in their own little bubble, a dangerous place to be when werewolves walk the same streets, an insensible state to be within any environment. We followed them into what could be classed as a nightclub if St. Andrews would lower itself to have such a thing. The Lizard was a bar in the basement of another bar and restaurant. It played mind-numbingly bad dance music, badly mixed by shite DJs through a tinny shite sound system. It pained me to my very once good music core and even hurt my teeth after having a youth filled with great dance music mixed by those DJ gods like Kyle Cox. The club stunk of ancient alcohol and ancient sweat on young bodies. The bodies swayed almost rhythmically to the painful music in the manner of alcohol-diminished dancers on the world's worst dance floors. Asa took point in a position that lets her keep full awareness of the lambs and yet keep us unseen or at least unnoticed from their dull eyes. She was completely focused on them with a tick twitching in her jaw. She became more beautiful as her thirst started to excite me. Her face turned to mine, and in that moment I fell deep into that pit which I call love. I read in her eyes that she wanted and what she needed, the need for violence and the sexual charge that it gave her as she started ready to separate our victims from the herd. She smiled once more, and with the flick of her hand told me to wait where I was as she strode with utmost confidence over to the young couple and became all to them. They stared and they lusted as her lithe walk entranced them. She, in that moment, was their welcome death, and they wished for it. Their life was at an end. But to be honest, this moment and her involvement would be the greatest moment of these little sheep's lives. I smelt a change in context in the air. The victims now looked upon her with their own predatory eyes. They both wanted her. To be frank, the room wanted her, but these two in particular were feeling the burst of raw sexual charge that she effervesced. They stood jaws dropped and slack-mouthed, open. Dumb monkeys not able to do anything about the drive that they both wanted fulfilled. Asa pushed past them to the bar and they never took their eyes off her. She partially ignored them, only offering a flash of eye contact as the bartender, a cute young man, decided to ignore the queue waiting in line for his attention. His focus now lay on this beautiful woman, newly arrived, and he crabbed his way to Asa to serve her needs first. She controlled these people with her mere presence. Her manner and confidence controlled all around her. They had no choice but to do what she wished. It was not fear that generated this veneration, but the raw nature of her sexuality. All wanted to be with her, and all wanted her to be with them. I felt a moment as the green monster of jealousy leapt into my brain. She seemed to realise this and looked at me briefly, and with a reassuring smile she calmed that creature, as in that one look she told me that all this was for me. After getting served the martinis that she ordered, she turned away from the bar and started to make her way back to me across the dance floor. The dancers formed a bubble of space around her that none entered. She just walked, and a sea of people parted to allow her passage. Our victim's eyes had never left that walk, and as she got to me, she passed me a drink, and I knew what to do instinctively. We both raised our glasses to the cute pair, and in that moment they felt bliss. In that one moment they saw a future that could be very interesting for both of them. Then the spell broke as the two started to speak hurriedly between themselves. The conversation was excited and full of fun and naughtiness, and as it ended, the pair of them patted themselves down and started to make their way through the press of bodies on the dance floor towards us. Their journey was not as unimpeded as Asa's. They had to push past all to get to what they needed, which was our company. As they arrived, we were chatting and laughing in the pretense of not noticing them. Of course we were fully aware. When they did eventually arrive, I followed my old love's lead. She turned to them. They could not speak. The nerves of the moment had got to them, and they had no idea of what to do or say. Asa did, though. She turned and smiled at the couple. It was a smile that was hypnotic. It removed all fear, all ability to make sound judgments, and all the abilities to raise any red flag in the next few moments. Hi, I am Asa, and this is my husband Will. Do you wish to join us and see where the night goes? It was amazing. She just asked him that while sipping on a drink. We drank, we danced, and I took a lead. One moment I was dancing with him, then them, then her, then Asa, then our bodies combined in rhythm and dance in such a way that we did not think who was whom. As the bar closed, we left as a group. Asa and Jane were laughing and giggling while holding hands as they walked before us. Timothy walked with me, somewhat silently but excitedly. I reached for his hand and held it. He took it with a hefty grasp, and I felt his body relax as he felt the moment in his very soul. We got to the taxi rank, and Jane and Tim made a move to the nearest car. They were grieving at the loss of this intimacy already. They did not know what to do or say to us. They did not want this moment to go away. Asa stared into my eyes, and I watched the pair of them start to open the door of the cab and get ready for goodbyes. We held each other tightly and kissed as they patiently waited for this moment of passion to end before they climbed into the car and sadly left. Asa broke the kiss and leant back in my arms so she could see my face. She brought the back of her right hand to her lips and wiped the moisture from her mouth as she smiled and nodded to me. I knew exactly what she wanted, so I nodded back. We broke our hold, and holding my hand turned to the taxi. "Would you like to spend the night with us?" she asked them, grinning and laughing. "We would like to have you," she continued. The feeling of relief and resolution in one came flooding from Tim and Jane. They looked at each other and smiled and nodded, and we walked towards the cab. There I held Tim and kissed him fully on the lips. Asa held Jane and enclosed her mouth in a similar moment of beauty. Asa then leaned back while being held in the arms of the woman and kissed the boy, and by some miracle I leant and kissed the girl. We all laughed, we all relaxed, and we were all excited in the moment. A different kind of excitement for the wolves, though. On arriving at their home, a very nice little classy bungalow on the outskirts of the town, we left the taxi and walked up the path to the front door. Jane now put her finger on her lips as we quietly opened the door, mouthing that we have to be quiet, not to wake the kids. The wolves in us looked at each other and expressed a little more joy at this unexpected gift. In the back room, we were permitted to make noise once more, and the chat started as the flirting truly began and the drinks were got. Music played, and the fun began. Asa sat on the couch with Jane, and they stared deep into each other's eyes. The girl was hypnotised. As Tim and I watched the two beautiful women melted together, he and I just sat on the couch opposite, watching. He was tense and nervous, even under the influence of a lot of alcohol. Asa was facing Jane and their bodies were close, touching at the thighs and hips. Asa reached for Jane's hair and started to partially play with it as she stared into her potential partner's eyes. The girl initially shied away and dropped her head, a level of embarrassment shown. A slight unwanted gasp was given away from her lips. The wolf cupped the woman's chin, lifting it and looking into her eyes, nodding reassurance, and then bringing the woman's mouth to hers in the moment of the most delicious kiss I've ever seen. The kiss became more and more passionate as the girls dragged each other close, and their bodies entwined and meshed and became immersed into one another. The moment was incredible. Tim was wholly focused on the scene before him. The excitement was very apparent. He was very excited, nervous and jealous, all and at the same time. I was watching him, and as I did so, my own needs required fulfilling. The sense of the pheromones, fresh sweat and pre-cum was heady. I grabbed the man's face and dragged it towards mine. At first he hesitated and tried to withdraw from my grasp. I held him firm and smiled in reassurance. He reached forward, his mouth open and his eyes closing as he sampled my lips and relaxed, his soul lost in the oblivion of the moment. Over the next 3 hours, the wolves lay with the sheep. A mixing of bodies, a mixing of fluids, a mixing of pleasure, a mixing of pain and wants and needs that could be realised. In the following hours, none of us knew where one body started and another ended. None of us knew who was inside whom or pleasuring who. We writhed, we heaved. Sensations would pass between us as if in those moments we were one body and one shared mind. We knew the sheep in all their stupefied glory. That little prey-like centre in their mind was so easy to convince that we were all alike, that at this moment they were our equal. That's when Asa turned. She turned this into a truly beautiful moment for us. I sensed a change in her mental demeanour. She had fulfilled her sexual needs. She dripped with sweat and lay with her sex engulfing Tim's while she fucked him hard, holding her posture by supporting herself with her arms. As she slammed her body into his hips, his face was that of ecstasy, but it started to change as she increased the power of each thrust into this young man's waist. His face just changed, showing the beginning of confusion and then suddenly a little fear, then pain. He stopped holding her hips and started to try to push those hips away from her. He was trying to slow Asa, trying to stop those meteoric thrusts as she slammed herself home. She stopped the ride and looked down at the man. "Do you really want me to stop, Tim? Are you not getting what you really want from me? Tell me to stop again and I will." The man's face changed. He'd lost the intensity of the new sensations he was feeling. "Just tell me what you want, Tim. Just tell me and you can have more." The man was lost. "I want more," he whispered. "You want more?" she asked, a seductive smile playing across her lips, as she began to move in his lap once more. "You want more," she repeated. "Yes, I need it," he replied. She laughed out loud and started to grind harder, driving her hips harder and harder into the man. His moans and groans became louder as she drove herself onto him with heavier and heavier thrusts. As the intensity built, she started to change, her eyes changing to the greeny blue of her posits. The beast started to join in the moment. Tim's eyes opened for a moment and he saw the woman before him start to change. Fear took him, but he soon accepted his fear for the sensations that he needed to be fulfilled. She now took her full werewolf form. She was truly beautiful. The monster before me was the most powerful and sexually exciting bestial creature that I had ever seen. My own excitement increased, and I could not take my eyes off this amazing display in front of me. I was behind his kneeling partner, shaking, slaking, and enjoying burying my own needs. Her face was in the mattress of the bed, and she was screaming. I was watching my goddess as she rode this poor human for the pleasure that she needed, like the predator she was. He no longer mattered. His life and soul were hers, and only of value for her needs. I could focus on nothing else, and my own body started to synchronize with hers as she increased the power of each stroke. Again and again, her body's powerful movements grew, going beyond the strength and power of any mere human. The poor monkey on the bed began to feel the true strength of her. He started to now yell with ecstasy and pain. He then started to scream as the creature that mounted him took him far beyond his tolerances. As he cried into the night, she leant over his face. Her eyes were looking directly into those eyes of fear and pain. Saliva dripped from a now wolf and toothy maw onto his face. Her body a steam piston in action on the broken body beneath. She laughed in his face. Come on, Tim. Come on, Tim. Harder, harder. She roared a guttural scream at him. He screamed louder. He was breaking beneath her. Yet his screams were those of a man lost in his own world of sensations. Tim, she said, you're going to have the most incredible experience. I'm actually going to fuck you to death. And she did. With one last drive of her hips, he yelled out in a last moment of elation and was gone. Little had I known, but poor Jane had been taking the brunt of my own excitement. I had her hair in my right hand, and I had forced her face hard into the bedding that she couldn't be heard over the noise of Asa and her prey. I lifted her face and jerked her head to look at mine. It was a mask of enraptured pain, a face now of smeared makeup, tears and snot, but the one of sheer happiness. I laughed, and for a moment Asa's eyes met mine. We were in each other's minds, truly together at this moment, like no one would ever understand or feel. 15 minutes later, Asa and I lay still on the bed. We lay on our backs, arms around each other, staring at the ceiling. I had never experienced anything like those last few moments. It was more than sex. It was more than making love. It was an act only two predators of our level could enjoy. The sensations were too much for us post-orgasmic pleasure, and the delight of causing wanton pain and death were on us. The bodies of whoever they were now lay together on the floor in a bloody heap. I looked into Asa's eyes as she looked into mine. In those moments, so much information was passed between us. This was true love. I mean true love, you monkeys will never know. She smiled and kissed me, rolling onto her side, her hand rubbing my chest as she slowly reverted back to her human form. Suddenly a new sound. What was it? A baby was crying. No, two babies. She cocked her head and listened, slowly coming to her knees on the bed. Again excited, she smiled and motioned with her eyes in the direction of the door and the crying infants. In return, I smiled and felt a flutter in my stomach. She reached for my hand and stepped off the bed, inviting me to follow her. Together, naked, sweaty and bloody, we slipped from the bedroom door into the dark corridor. We were drawn by the distressed little one's protests. Suddenly the cries ceased, and again the house returned to silence. A ticking clock, the only noticeable sound.